Usually we start this out with a little bit of the news du jour. Let me do the spotlight thing. Uh, Go, spotlight me, and bring up my notes so I don't forget anything. I have just confirmed that I will be doing both some in-person and some virtual workshops for Metalworks in Boston. So in addition to my own schedule, I have coming up so I've got my in-person workshop in August 9th and 10th here in Portland, doing clasps, a 2-day clasps class. And if you can't make that one, I've got a virtual 3-day clasps class in October. September 6th, 13th, and 20th, we're doing it as 3 separate Saturdays. There's going to be a virtual Metalworks class on decorative stone settings. November 17th, I'm doing a combined virtual and on-site lecture session, conversation, I would call it, called Do I Keep My Day Job? So it's all about the kinds of things you need to think about if you're moving from hobbyist to business. And then January of 26, Metalworks also wants me doing a virtual prong setting class, and I'll be focusing on round and pair prong settings. So those of you that went through the Cogswell project with me may have seen variations on those two themes in the past, but we'll just be doing that in more focused and attention to detail ways on that workshop. So that's my workshops. My next show isn't until November in Boston again. I'm waiting to hear about a few more in-betweens, but my show schedule is really light. But that is okay because the best news is that I was awarded a grant from the the San Francisco Metals Guild, MAG SF down in the southern part of California. And I got one of their annual grants to help me kick off finally writing the clasp making book that I've been wanting to do. And so that grant is going to let me get photographs for a bunch of the clasps.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so now I have to actually write the book. I've got it all really well outlined. I've got the format I'm going to do. I've got a framework for how I want to present each project because there's some great books out there that have a clasp here and there. There's a wonderful new book out by Sarah McRae that is called Findings and Fixtures or something like that, which does have some step by step, but it's very light touch step by step. And not a lot of detailed drawings and pictures and so on. So I don't feel like, I mean, it's not about competition. I think as many people as possible should be talking about how to make clasps. Otherwise, there's not really a big how-to step-by-step clasp book out there that I've found. There's several, again, that have a few really good detailed clasp mechanisms in them, but nothing that just concentrates on that. And then meanwhile, I've got a show opening up in Seattle in honor of the Mokumegane project that was being done in honor of Phil, who is the man who does a lot of the making or did a lot of the pattern making in modern day Mokumegane if you buy pre-patterned work. And so Danica Design Studios in Seattle is opening a show this Sunday that'll run for a month that has an incredible array of artists all working in Mokume, either his Mokume patterns or inspired by the work he's done. So if you're in that area, first of all, Danica is a beautiful little gallery, but second of all, that show is up. And if you're a fan of Mokume as a material, it's well worth the visit. And so I have a few pieces in that show. And opening in July, I have a couple of big pieces if you're in Kentucky, out at the Kentucky Museum, which is my first museum gallery setup. Museum, what's the term for it that I'm blanking on because I'm so tired this week? Exhibit, that's the word that was escaping me. So I've got an exhibit there, along with many other metalsmiths, a lot of blacksmiths and other metal workers. So yeah, lots of moving parts. That's what's going on with me. And otherwise, I'm going to remind you that you are, by being on this video, you are eligible to use the Rio for Schools code. If you haven't refreshed that in a while, I'll put it in the chat so that you can remember that code. And I'll give you a little bit about how to use it as well. There you go. And what else do I want to tell you? Just a reminder that this project started about taking apart your own box of unfinished things, figuring out which things you need to scrap for materials, which things you can redesign, or if you need to get past a technical challenge, we're here for that too. We are also looking at things where you just can't stand the design. You got partway through and it wasn't what you thought it would be, or something like that. There's lots of reasons it can land there, but it's up to you how long it stays. And we've done a pretty good job of clearing out a lot of things from my original box of about 50 projects. Many of them got destroyed in that first take apart stage, but some of those materials have made their way back into things. And I'll show you now the latest piece, the big one that we've been working on. So this is what we've been working on during the sessions. And we'll come back to that in a minute. That has progressed since last we saw each other. But this is, I gotta zoom out a little bit, I guess. This is the piece that, what am I doing here? Why am I not showing everything? Come on. There we go. Sorry for the wobbly. So this is the piece that was in the box for a long, long time, a few years. And this is petrified palm wood. And then the hollow forms are sterling and fine silver with 24 karat Kimbu. And there's three little tourmaline that pick up the colors that are subtly in the stones. And then it's just a basic chain connection and clasp. But there's that, and I had to make a pair of earrings to go with. So a little mismatched set that picks up the stones and the gold and everything again. So that was recently finished, hot off the press. Any questions about the techniques that are in that?
Can you hold those up to the camera just a little bit?
Oh, sure, I can actually zoom for you.
Yeah. And by the way, congratulations on all the other announcements. That's so awesome.
Thank you.
Really exciting.
Yeah, it's
Amazing.
a little overwhelming. So this is the earring pair. They're posts.
Fabulous.
Still hollow forms. So they're a little heavy, but not too bad. And I always like mismatched, not perfect sets. But again, it picks up the same stones that show in this one panel, over here. Oh, over here. There we go.
Beautiful.
And as always, I really like to do stuff on the backs of my pieces. So even the backs of these are textured. You can see that everything has a little bit of texture on the back. And this has actually become one of my new favorite obsessions for a pattern. This is the kind of packing material that is the brown paper that's just been slit so that it creates a sort of dimensionality to it. And if you pull it apart, it kind of accordions. This is just rolling that paper through the mill, the back pattern. Let me zoom out and then show that on the back again. The front pattern is all engraved and a combination of engraving and using a cutting wheel, a cutting disc. But this great texture that gets shiny in places and textured in others is just that amazing paper. So that's one project I've been doing this week, or this month rather. And pardon me, I just have to double check that my mother has not. Okay. Sorry, gang. My mom is in the hospital and she's doing well, but I occasionally need to make sure that there's not a message I need to jump on. Next, and this is what drove me to remember that I'd promised an unusual setting, is this is a one-of-a-kind chain collection that I do that I love making, but they don't sell fast, so I can only allow myself to make them every once in a while. And it's driven by whatever the center stone is, often a funky, druzy quartz type thing or some really abstract piece. But in this case, this really great shape of a faceted stone drove the pattern that recurs in, and it's usually this kind of scaling from large to small series of links. And so it's an elegant sort of nightwear. I call this chained after dark, which is it as opposed to my everyday wear chained. This looks a little funky when it's hanging on this particular mannequin, but um, when it's sitting right, it centers and it sort of sits out like that on a body.
That's nice.
And whenever I do that, I like to make a pair of earrings to go with. They're big and fun, but I keep them very light. So these, I sell them separately, but for whatever reason, I just really enjoy making a matchy set. And then sometimes if I have enough links as I'm playing around with the design, I'll make a bracelet to go with as well. In this case, this wasn't quite the structure I wanted to put into a bracelet. So so we're gonna, if we want to today, we'll talk about how to make that particular kind of setting.
Yeah.
We can also keep going on hinges because I got so much on hinges. And then this is the mochame work. So I did while I was the first material that we patterned, excuse me, at the annual class was a copper brass combo. And so this is the pattern that I put down, which I will zoom in for you again. Maybe. Zoom for me. Gonna pick up in the camera.
Yeah, a little
Hard.
bit. Yeah. Oh, there it is.
There we go. So it's blackened on the copper, and then the brass is what's showing through in that gorgeous warm tone.
Wow.
And I happen to have a stone with this funky shape that I brought with me that I always love these drusies. And so, of course, I like my hollow forms and I like my unusual concave and convex. So this was a little bit of a challenge to get the concave factor on a non-round shape. And then that, again, the stone and the material drives the links. So you can see the repeating patterns that show up based on the lines or the dots, depending on which side you're on, and those just alternate into a full chain. So that was one. And then this was simpler ones, again with the concave factor. Same pattern material, I just didn't darken it as much. And just a simple little addition of stone up at the top. I cannot keep in my frame today, can I? So hollow forms galore. It's been a lot of hollow forms this year. Darn. Oh shucks. So any questions about any of those?
No, they're beautiful though.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been having fun. It's nice when I've been working on the big stuff to occasionally give myself like a little refresher in between, something brighter and lighter than the huge hollow forms. But super big we've been working on this project. So here's where I've gotten to on our huge project. As promised, I left some of the hinges for doing this time around, but I left a little bit more than I anticipated because I'm not feeling that the combination of positions of the hinges is actually going to flow the way I want it to around the neck. It's a little too stiff at the mid fold. So I'm still contemplating whether I'm actually going to undo a lot of this work. Well, some, but sometimes that has to happen. And especially when you're designing in sort of stages like we've been doing with the month in between, and it kind of gets a little awkward to begin with because you sort of start and stop the creative flow. But let's see what we're talking about here. So hopefully we get I put some tape down before I put those in place. And oh, I realized I forgot the usual. Does anybody have anything they want to show off for show and tell? I usually start with that instead of end with that these days. or any questions about a project you're stuck on, help getting past it. Nothing?
I will when I start working again.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so what's happening here is we need both directions to hinge. We need to be able to hinge this way, forward and back, so that when it goes over, I gotta see if you guys are seeing what I think you're seeing. I'm gonna rotate my camera a little bit better for you guys. It's a little more straight on. Yeah. So we need some of this kind of hinging for as it comes over the shoulder, but we also need this kind of hinging for when it curves around the neck. It curves around the body in general. But look what's happening right up top there, right? It's sort of hanging out, half folded, instead of really making the bend. It needs to be able to do both directions where it's pivoting. And even if I take it lower, the problem is that because each of these units is so solid, no matter what I do, something is going to hit. So let's take this down. So while the hinges are a cool idea, I don't think they're working. Rather, I think there's too much of the hinge, and I need to come up with something more fluid for some of the in-betweens. And I don't know how I feel about that, or what my solution will be. So here it gets a little awkward right at this neck point. And then it will take another turn, and this one will be sort of stuck hanging out up here because it won't be able to do that. Right? So I need something that can really give me both directions at once. This is going to be fine once it gets across here, but my connection point, showing very well, my connection point here is neither an upright nor a back and forth. Even if I put it with the back and forth so that it has this kind of pivot, it doesn't have the smoothness going downhill. So it may be back to the drawing board. Any thoughts? Any ideas? Can I get much closer? She's except for me. Yes, absolutely.
Could you do something like maybe a very short, like 3-loop chain on each side between those two sections?
So
And
here to here,
yeah.
um, I could absolutely do that. It's like am I gonna have to do it at each point?
No, I don't
Because
think, I think you just need to do it where it's really getting stuck, where it's changing direction more.
yeah, Sunny, is that close enough? Be able to see what we're seeing? I can't have it this way because it hangs out in space. And sure, not our bodies aren't quite that flat, but it's definitely still gonna stick out like a Gila monster
Yeah.
collar or something.
Or
And
maybe you could do like add like a 3-loop chain into a couple of spots. Like
yeah, I think it would end up being multiple spots once I started. Because here's
yeah,
what we
but you
get.
could have the front. Go ahead.
We get this weird, awkward, like up and down hill thing, right? So
Right.
I get good movement around the neck this way,
Yeah.
but then it does this kind of lift off thing. So I think my problem is more in these pieces. So if these were all disconnected, of course I've got them all connected because I soldered them because I was trying to get them all done for our class. Um, if I changed these out to linked, I might get where I want to go.
Yeah.
Any other ideas, folks? I mean, chain is an obvious one because it gives us multiple directionality for the mobility.
You could do like a ball joint on those two.
Ooh,
Had a more
Oh,
circular ability to.
huh. So let's think about that. So ball joints, gang, are the ones that kind of go in two directions. My hands are out of frame. They sort of go in all directions.
right.
They've got a double hook. So let's think
Yeah,
about that.
and I've also seen them where it attaches into a hole, like you solder a metal slot, but it could also be like a circle. And the ball goes into that and it's captured by that, and it can pivot freely.
Like a joint.
Yeah, kind
Mhm.
of like a hip joint or something.
Huh. So hip joint, what would that? So again, our stiffness ends up being about how much we, because of the size of these. If these were all smaller, much smaller, I wouldn't be having this problem. But I think our big issue is here. So let's think about it. If that had a ball joint, do I have any that I didn't connect yet? Yes, I can take this one apart. I think if I can poke that out. That I left one to show you guys how I add the gold beads, but we may not want to do that at this time. So here, there we go. Right now we're stuck with this action. So if we put a ball joint in it, it would be more of this action.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's a lot of build.
But you might be able
Hmm.
to do it just like once on either side, on the back side above the, like above the shoulder blades, the part where
Yeah,
it
at the
feels
worst.
like it has to make the most flex.
So here's my personal peeve on only doing the single spot is then we've got so much different visual breakup of the look between each
Mhm.
piece that the only yeah, if it were only hitting like right here, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But I think truly that it's going to have a flex problem based on the body shape of the wearer, just because we're doing a progression of sizes, right? So if this fits you here, but me here, we've got two different pivot points.
Yeah.
So I think if I were going to do that, I would need to do it in place of the upright hinge position for everything.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Um, any other? I love the ball joint idea. I mean, I love it and I hate it because making ball joints is
Oh,
terrifying.
yeah.
I have
Um,
an idea.
sure.
Solder on the connecting pieces. Each piece will get a jump ring and have another jump ring in the middle, and that will give the piece its flexibility.
Yes. Yeah. I think that was kind of where you were headed, right, Betsy? Is the triple chain link?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well, it would come out to kind of like that. I just thought, if you had like the basic front piece and then just the chain on each side, you're not really breaking up the continuity that much.
So that
Um,
one we can actually fake that one out because we've got things we can connect to on each side. Hold on a sec. You can see how that's going to look. Right side. Use some. I'm going to use some oversized ones so they show. I'd probably go a little smaller than this. What we can do. I think this would need it to be on each of, like it would
yeah,
take the place of both types of hinges that we've got at
yeah,
present. They're so thin that they may not hold on this weight. Let's see. So this definitely will leave enough flexibility
hmm
directions. The question becomes whether it will stabilize enough to hold the weight of this piece, or
yeah,
is having that much torque. Remember that we designed this very first clasp unit with that. It needs to have, it needs to stay pretty solidly laying down against the body, right? So my worry would be if I did all chain, would this pivot leave this loose?
yeah,
Um, So it's possible that I could get away with this direction, switching these back to regular. It helps if I connect the right sides, but switch these back to the hinges that I've already got, and only swap these out. which would give a little bit more stability, and they'd be small, much smaller jump rings. And that would at least have a consistent flow of alternating.
Mhm.
Because I think the real challenge on the bend part is when it comes to too large of a segment in the middle, more than at the
Yeah.
ends. The ends have flex. Any other thoughts out there? I'm liking the chain one as easy and quick, relatively speaking. I'm
Yeah.
Oh,
liking
yeah.
the ball joint as clever and oh my God, what am I going to do to
Yeah.
build a ball joint?
$9 million necklace.
Right, right.
Charging for
The hours
time.
in this one so far. Any other thoughts? Nope. Okay. Well, those are great ideas, but as you can see, I got a lot of thinking to do about this one. I may actually take it with me while I'm vacationing so I can just stare at it for a while. Or I may decide to not think about it until I get back and I put it aside. Because at this point, it's staring me in the face. Um, this is also a point, by the way, where if I were in this jam and we weren't doing this as the project that's central to Box of Unfinished Things, I might scrap it. I might not scrap it completely. I might scrap any use of the major pieces
Mhm.
and put them into something else, and
Mm,
then do
good
something
idea.
completely different, like pearls, right? And have a
Yeah.
triple strand of pearls. Um,
Nice.
but I don't know. I'm going to have to give that thought.
I
But
like that.
that's a lot. Say again?
I like that idea very much. Putting gemstone with the sterling silver centerpiece.
Yeah. I think the reason that I avoided stones, let me go find the stone that's going in this puppy. I know it's tucked away here somewhere. Oh, there we go. The challenge for me on this stone is that it's a lovely cut, but the color is just weird enough. Not quite white, not quite yellow, not quite pink. The only thing, yeah, I don't know that like vivid color gemstones coming off of this because I could see like maybe I could go with the those lovely mixed color perlin faceted gemstone strands and put like six of them and maybe make some components that hold the stones and the strands together. And then maybe pop a couple on here, which we talked about doing something like that either way in gold. Um, but I also am still worried whether it's going to hold as a clasp. But maybe that's what I do is I go back and I re-envision the rest of it as something else. Um,
Because there's a lot of work that you put into that, and it would be a shame to,
scrap
scrap
it,
the
scrap
part.
it.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, you
Yeah,
can use it.
yeah, I'm certainly gonna be able to use it no matter what. They will all become something.
yeah.
It's
Mhm.
what it's what because um, there's something to be said for this. Like these pieces as units and the progression is really a lovely one. I
Mhm.
think I'm getting stuck on how stiff, awkward these middle hinges are. So I may need to strip out all my middle hinges and sort of live with them and look at how their motion can be adjusted before I decide concretely one way or the other. And of course, I can go back and look at some of my other techniques for connecting because I'll bring back the one that I showed you with the palm wood.
Right.
This connection would
Yeah.
be just fine. Like this would
Right.
make it work as long as I pick, just like I did on the palm wood. I'll remind you that I had to pick some to go vertically over the shoulders and some to go horizontally.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
So same deal could work on this set. But we stepped away from it originally just because I was already doing multiple pieces with that particular hinging. There may be a reason. It's kind of a classic, easy, mobile, fluid hinge.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Well,
this
put the
whole
stone in your purse and take it with you wherever you're going. And if you run into a lapidary, say, "Can you cut me in one of these in a different color?"
So the nice thing is I could actually do that. This is
Yeah.
Joe Jelks of Horizon Lapidary, and he'll cut
Yeah.
stones for me to my spec. But
Oh,
I
okay.
really love this stone. I
It's
really,
a
really do.
beautiful stone. It just gets
And
a
I,
little washed out.
Oh, totally. I didn't even know there
yeah,
was a stone in there.
yeah. Well, it wasn't until I put it in there because we've been leaving. I don't want to fling it somewhere by accident. But the other thing is, I can also think about putting black behind here, um,
Yeah.
or gold behind here. But either any of them sort of disappoint me for what I really like about the original. Because when we started this, I'll remind you, this started as part of where's my part of this series, not this
Mm.
shape, but I had
Mhm.
those funky links that I was going to use just that stone as the centerpiece and the funky links, right?
Ah,
So
Yeah.
okay.
it was feeling awkward and boring, frankly, at that point. And then you guys helped me say, well, what balance is it? We talked about that balance and the negative and positive, and creating something that pulls out from the druzy and from the shape, and that's where we built a hollow form. And then we said, well, are we going to just lock them together? No, that will never do. And that's when we came up with the class, which took a while to
Yes.
figure out. And I didn't want to give up that class.
Oh, you're frozen on my end.
Needs
Me too.
emphasis
There you
and
go.
repetition. So like I can follow all of our progression through this project and the reasoning we had for each piece of it, but it may be time to step back and say it's overgrown itself.
I
Yeah.
like those two
Uh,
pieces right in front of you, and just put some jump. Yeah. I think that's a beautiful centerpiece just like that, and maybe make a chain to go with it. That is just lovely.
Hmm.
yeah, it absolutely could stand on its own. There's a lot I can do with the units from
Yeah.
this, up to and including, like the idea of a fancier chain between sections of them makes it kind of cool. And then your movement isn't as locked in by the units. It's more
Mhm.
about putting some separation
Yeah.
between segments, and I can create a sort of chain link combination piece. Um,
Yeah.
so this could absolutely by itself, here, let's get rid of this for a second because that's the thing that's getting in the way. This could absolutely be something that landed sort of this kind of build up with chain links in each section, separating the
Hmm.
big blocks,
Yeah.
and boom, you've got something going on, right?
Yeah. And that's plenty.
Right.
I mean, have you found when you're selling that, I mean, like when I go and I walk around to the shows, I see this little itty bitty jewelry. It just,
Yeah.
it just seems to be in.
I never worry about what's in because I'm never making the jewelry that's in. It's just not, it's not in me.
Right?
Right.
I just do whatever comes, and if it sells, it sells, right?
Right. Right. And I know it's a luxury because I do have an alternative career as well. But yeah, it doesn't
Popular.
need to be everything for everybody. So here we're
Right,
Well,
getting
right,
into some
right.
not only that, but when it starts getting trendy, then everybody starts doing it, and
right.
there's nothing to set you apart from somebody else. So whoever like answers a message quicker, and gets it shipped out is gonna make the sale. So,
Yeah,
Right.
and then it becomes mass produced, which I never want
yeah,
my work to look mass produced.
yeah,
So
Right. Hmm.
here's some interesting stuff going on already just by
yeah.
separating those blocks by a component here and there, and then the
Oh,
folds do actually work in various appropriate spots, right?
Hmm.
yes, that's
So as
great.
long as there's the extra mobility of connectivity between them, we get something out of it. And this could mean that I can go looking for some stone elements that go between, or maybe you can go that route. And I just, some gold work on here, like I've done on other large pieces. The
Hmm.
thing I'll have to worry about with chain connections between these is if I only do a single line of chain between each, they will have a tendency to flip, right?
Mm.
So what I would need is probably to do a double chain. Do I have any scrap chain hanging around? Hang on a sec. So, see if I've got anything that really grabs. Nothing. This is probably not any of the chain that I would use for this, but um, the sheer act of just putting a double, pretend that this is only linking between them and not hanging out there. As soon as I do a double connection, it
Mm-hmm.
immediately becomes harder for it to flip. Not
Right.
impossible, but harder. So I could do a connection, a wider and a narrower one there.
Mm.
That runs into other technical challenges because it limits how much it's going to curve on any given body. So some
Right.
bodies are long and narrow and they'd be stretched to the max, and others they'd relax. So I'm watching what I'm doing with my hands so you can actually see the relaxed part.
Well, if you filled the
So
hollow forms with sand, they'd be heavy enough not to flip.
I don't know about that. But you can see there's even with a simple connection like a series of chain links, there's
Yeah.
some challenges to it. Maybe it's easier with
Yeah.
one. So we need to get the good. I think of it as when you're doing a double link like this, it's kind of like the icing alongside a wedding cake.
Mm.
Each tier that it has to be wider and longer at the bottom in order to look
Right.
proportional, in
Yeah.
order to hold it.
Yeah.
So and then if I'm tall and skinny, it becomes very taut, and this
Right.
flats, and vice versa. So that would take some experimenting to see what would look good. But
Mm-hmm.
my gut is saying I may land on this becomes not just two necklaces as it was from the old chain and the new one, but it may become three necklaces by the time we're done.
Yeah.
Um, and then I have to go digging in my pearl strands and see what I've got. I don't know that I have enough strands. With something this big, I can't see doing less than a triple strand of beads or pearls. Maybe I do have sapphires. You know, there's all kinds of possibilities. Let's see what we got. Bring that stone back momentarily.
Okay.
Okay, so there's that. And I don't know if I got a lot out right now. This is not terrible. It's good sign for later consideration. So if we return to centerpiece land, and then a little something something that brings multiple strands,
Yeah.
that could be pretty spectacular.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure I have some not great pearls. That's a terrible color. That's an overwhelming color. So doubled up pearls. Boy, pearls sure feels like they might be the way to go. But probably in a closer to the cream color.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything branded in cream.
Yeah, that's nice.
Although I can also see something vivid.
Ooh. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
do too.
That's a nice pop.
It also brings out the color in the
it does.
stone.
It
Yeah.
softens the stone. It does, doesn't it? Let's see what other
Yeah.
ornaments. So that's a possibility. I've got these beautiful, I think these are sapphire. Those kind of gray out, don't they? That doesn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, too matchy.
Yeah. Although I do have to do something with those because they're beautiful.
Yeah.
Another strand of the reds in here. Do so. What's it look like with two?
Ooh. Sign me up.
Mm, yeah,
Yeah, I like,
red
you
over
see,
the
I like
pearls.
that.
Yeah, that's kind of a possibility. Although I think I might want to play around with multiple tonalities of color.
Mm-hmm.
I could have sworn I had some of those wonderful multicolor um, sapphires. Here we got some pearls that are
Yeah, but
closer to the color.
if you can keep something like that rich red near the stone, it really does.
It does draw it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does make a difference.
It's a beautiful compliment.
Say that again?
The red is a really beautiful complement to the center
Yeah.
stone.
Although think about stylistically, look at just how different the feel of it is. Like
Yeah,
the customer that would wear the pearl version versus the customer that would wear the wild red,
Yeah.
right.
right? Two
Mm-hmm.
like this modernizes it, this classifies it,
Right.
classifies it,
I think you're going to
right?
have to make two different ones.
No,
Yeah, I think you have to make
no, I only
it.
have one of those.
Well,
Let's
I
see
have
what
to go into
else.
production.
I'll have to do what?
You're going to have to make one in the red and one with the pearls.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that color is too close and it kind of washes it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, those last pearls were the best of the
They were
pearls.
so far, yeah, I probably want to go picking a specific. Um, I'm not a fan of this style of pearl. It's a little too all over for me, but conceptually, the strand pearls is a definite elegant factor.
I
Hmm.
like that strand of pearls because they're irregular.
Yeah.
You like them for the regularity? Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it looks great with that stone and that centerpiece. I think it looks
Yeah, because the
fantastic.
texture and everything.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I can absolutely, yeah, this may actually be a good use for some pearls that I've had sitting for a long time because I don't care for the thing. I was going to take that strand apart for the individual pearls. And definitely this is too classic, the perfect
Yeah.
round or close to it. So it's a no-go on traditional round at the very least if it's pearls. And I really wish I could find my vivid sapphire strands. Oh, I've got something else in another vivid color. See what this does.
Yeah.
That's not nearly as rich as the reds.
Yeah. It's too
Yeah,
monotone.
it is. It is. I think the reds might be winning me over, but I'm gonna have to live with both of them. And this one's just a little too boho for the centerpiece.
Yeah.
This is glass. They're lovely, but they're not for this
Yeah, they're
project.
nice, but I don't think it doesn't really make the piece.
Yeah.
Right.
So this might be, I think this is the one or the other,
Yeah.
because together is no go. That's too much chaos in the textures. I think I'll have to pick up some more of these, it must be garnets or something. Because I'd need triple strands at least. And I think probably I would go, I like this size differential. So I might go
Uh-huh.
looking for bigger than this one and do three different, progressive
Oh,
large to
yeah.
small in the middle.
Rachel, do you have a particular vendor whom you purchase your strands from?
So I almost never use bead strands. I just am like a crow drawn to shiny things on occasion. Um,
Okay.
so I
I
have
have
them
no
from,
idea what you're talking about.
yeah, yeah, I have them from long years of going to gem shows and going, that one's
Yeah.
really pretty. I'm sure I'll do something with it.
Right.
Um, and I did for a long time have a pearls based collection.
Hmm.
Um, but I haven't done anything in that series in a few years. So yeah, that's a lot for me to think about, Dan. Thank you for walking through the ideas with me. And
Oh, thank you.
it may
Thanks
land
for
on that.
asking.
Yeah. Today, because we're not going to take it apart exercise, because I don't quite know what I want to take apart yet. Let's put this all aside. Get that back up so it's healthy. Oops, I forgot one of my strands. Clearly, I want the red because I left the red out, don't I? That guy out of there. Yeah. Let's see what we're on today. So the stones, the special settings. Working on making all the extra connector pins, but I can stop that. All right, so our exercise that people request, I think, can't remember who asked for this specifically, but at the end of the Cogswell project, people said, can you make sure you do one of these during the next project? So, this is a particularly unusual cut,
Yeah.
and I love it and have many in this range of stone cuts because there's something really appealing to me about a curve and corners, right? Something that just draws me in with this form. That's more interesting to me than if this were flat and this might be a long line or whatever. It just that all corners doesn't work for me as well as one line being interfered with by a curve. So you'll see I've got a couple stones that I can play with. And this is the kind of setting that I will tend to find a stone I really love and make the setting and then leave the setting sitting for a while. So this purple one, I must have made a year and a half, 2 years ago. And I just have it for when I'm ready for the project, right?
Yeah, smart.
So let me zoom in. Now, the only challenge is if I suddenly decide I want it in gold instead of silver, I'm never making them in gold and hanging on to them. If I'm making them in gold, they're for a reason. But then, so big deal, I lose a little silver and a little time that would have otherwise gone to, you know, it gives me practice and keeps my hand in on these somewhat challenging settings. Now,
Yeah.
these can be just step bezels, or you can do variations. This is a half finished because I didn't use good enough gauge. This needs to be thicker gauge. You can do a combination of a prong and base bezel. You can do decorative ones. You can do a half and half. That's one of the neat things about a shape like this. Oops, I'm out of frame. Shape like this, that it could be bezel wall and then prongs or a prong, right? It can be a half and half kind of thing. And you can obviously, of course, get basket settings, but basket settings are even harder than what we're about to do for step bezels. The other fun thing is these shapes sometimes are more interesting, although probably neither of the ones that I pulled, sometimes more interesting upside down.
Yeah.
Ooh,
You're frozen.
frozen.
Rose cut unusual shape.
Oh, there we go.
Sometimes look at the back and see if it's better for you. This one I wouldn't ever do upside down because it's a little too at risk. It needs the right side up. But this one I could potentially see going either way. There's wax on there from when I was setting it up for another project. But I could actually see it going either way.
Yeah.
But this upright for me, I think, because I really love that shape and had a necklace in this collection that had a larger version of this that I may want to make a small scale variant that was just all triangular offshoots of it. But again, I'm finding a lot to enjoy in the curve plus the triangles. Now, let's talk a little bit, and this is I'm probably going to have to get really zoomed in for you to see. Let's see if I can get to a spot where it's going to be useful to you guys. So looking at the cut of, right, there we go. Cut of this stone.
Mhm.
It's very, very thin along the edges, right? This is not a super well cut stone. The corners are very much at risk because they're super, super pointy. So this one's a tough one. Whereas this has a more stable, oh, I'm out of frame. It's
There
more
you go.
stable line to it. It's still a thin line, but it's got this second layer of cut. I'm trying to see if I can get this so that you can actually see what I'm seeing. There's sort of a partial cut underneath it to about here,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to this one, which goes straight
Yeah.
down, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So lighter stone gets more vivid, rich color in it. But this one gives you a little bit more to rest on
Mhm.
because our stone is going to be, I mean, our stone will set right on a wall that rests about there at that top curve. Now, the thing you got to watch out for is this also has too chubby of a belly to really sit super well. The belly is going to fight us. So the stones, I keep moving out of the wrong direction. There we go. So the belly of it is just a little like chunky, which makes it awkward to set. Not impossible because it's not a terrible, terrible cut. And it has one point that's really, really sharp. The others are okay, but this one's a little thin and pokey. So we'll just be careful to make our little divot marks before we set it.
Mm.
Get out of frame. So think about some of those things as you're looking at stones to buy. How easy will this be to set? Now the root tile is actually a good halfway between them. It still has a fairly flat surface going down, but it takes a little curve as it does, which is really nice. So this one will probably be a pretty straightforward one to set. It's got not super pointy corners, got a nice curve to it. The challenge is all the root tile in this is buried deep inside. I keep going out. There we go. So that root tile might not show terribly well, that one really rich red. That's not root tile if it's red, but whatever it is, the inclusion of the other mineral. It might not show super well if this is totally buried in.
Yeah.
So this one might be a better candidate for a prong setting that just brings the line in, or a special kind of setting of some sort that combines. Or it might be a good one for gold. Like, I don't know, is the threading in it gonna show better against gold, or is it gonna hide? It's gonna hide. It's probably not against gold, but maybe against black and silver it would pop. So all those are considerations, especially when you're spending the money that it takes to get some of the fancier cuts,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? So I'm gonna hold off on the rooftop because I want to think that one is a fancy enough stone that I want to think about what project I want it for. And I think I'm gonna go with yeah, I just did this one, so I'm not sure I want to do another purple. I'm gonna leave the I'm gonna go with the not a great line, but fairly straightforward to show you all the curve and corner combination. And the multiple corners, just let me zoom back out again so I'm not fighting so hard to get in camera. So the multiple corners is just more steps of what we're about to do when we only have the one corner and the curve, right? It's still going to be about getting the angle one at a time. There's two basic approaches to this kind of stone, and this is true with the dreaded emerald cut that those of you that know my Cogswell stuff know I hate with a passion deep in my soul, um, uh, because that level of precision is always challenging for me. But basically, we're going to be working either by measuring our stone on every angle and making careful notes, and then laying out a strip that we mark out and folding it all. Or my preferred method is we're going to work an edge, a corner and an edge at a time, right? So we're going to start somewhere in our longer line. And then we're going to make our first corner. and we're going to put the sharp turn in, and that's the important part, is you get your turn to fit perfectly. And then we go in and we measure where's my next one hit, and we work it. And then we go in and do the last one and work our way around. That's my preferred method, but if you are a meticulous artist, you absolutely could go the route of make each measurement. If you're going to do that, make a measurement and make a dot on whichever side you're starting on, right? So that you're always going, or even an arrow saying I'm going that way. Because otherwise it may look like this side and this side are exactly the same, but you don't want to get those messed up, especially when you get to more and more sides. Or if you're doing something more precise, like a well-cut emerald cut. So our goal is, if we're doing the measured version, our goal is to get from the outer point to the outer point, and you got to allow for a smidge for the cut and file, because the thing that happens most frequently is people cut to the exact measurement, and then by the time you put in, I'm going to draw with a whiteboard because it's to visualize. It's easy to forget about how much the fold takes away.
Yeah.
Anyway, there we go. So in each case, we're going to be putting in a strip of metal. We're doing the outside wall first, and we're going to be putting in.
Off camera.
Oh, thank you. Too far in. There we go.
Mhm.
So either way, we're taking a sheet and we're making a cut of some degree of angle that we're going to be taking away, right? We're making that notch, and then we're going to fold these up and over, right, to make the crease that we want. And sometimes on a nice square cut or a cushion cut, it's a very solid, close to 90-degree corner. But in these, it's going to be a steeper corner than that. In this one, that's close to a 90. I bet that's like an 89 or 88-degree corner. Either way, we're fitting it snugly. But the act of squishing these together shrinks out. Like this amount of material doesn't count in your dimension that you've measured out. So if you're doing the measuring route, account for that collapse that's going to happen between these 2 points. So if we were to measure, we would say, we know this needs to be 10 millimeters, and this needs to be 20 millimeters, and this is 14 millimeters, or whatever it is. And then enough room for the cutaway, which is going to depend on the thickness of your metal and the steepness of the angle and all kinds of things. And it's still going to be a rough estimate that you're doing, but I usually go with like a millimeter to 2 millimeter, millimeter and a half when I'm working with 22 gauge, give or take, depending on the cut. Worst case is you err a little bit too small and you stretch your walls once you're done, which we're going to do no matter which route we take. We're going to have situations where we do that. But so you'd measure each one out, cut them all out, and then do your entire fold around. That's option A if you're big on measuring. For me, I'm not worrying about measuring. I'm worrying about do one, fit the fold, position my next one, file it and cut it, fit the fold, position the next one, and working my way around. Questions? Okay, let's get to it. My 22 gauge. Where did I put that? Probably cleaned it up while I was cleaning it up.
Can I ask you, what gauge wire did you use for the shapes of that necklace?
For this necklace,
Yeah.
I am an odd duck. I like 13 gauge.
Okay. Thank you.
But you could absolutely do a 12 or a 14. It depends on the scale you're working in.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've done more delicate than that, but rarely in that collection. The heck did I put 22 gauge? I over cleans today. Which you wouldn't know by looking at my figure right now, but oh, there we go.
Cleaning up, what's that?
What's what?
Cleaning up, what's that?
Oh, cleaning up, yeah.
That wasn't in
Right,
any of
so-
my directions from any of my classes about cleaning up. I mean,
So
you
the
just
active,
the whole pile falls over, don't you? And then,
I I can only work in so much clutter before I have to clean, or else I'm just in an absolute brain block of creativity.
yeah.
And that's true in my house, that's true in my studio. But also for you guys, when I'm getting here, I realize that I don't want to have 10 things in the background that are going to distract you from looking at what we're actually working on. So for
Squirrel.
that, pardon?
Squirrel.
Yeah.
Distractions.
Um, all right, so for this stone at the scale that we're talking about, I am going to choose to use 22 gauge outer wall. You can go thicker if you want a heavy wall bezel. 22 for me is kind of a sweet spot of my hands can usually manage to do it if I need them to instead of using power tools, but also it has enough heft to feel like it's framing the stone. If I'm working on a way smaller than this stone, I might drop that down. But since I rarely work on way smaller stones, I don't do that very often. The interior line can be a 24, it can be a 26, low to 26, because it's just going to create enough of a resting wall, but it doesn't need to be much. The other thing is if you're ever working in gold, in most scenarios that you're creating these for, you could do gold outer, silver inner,
Mhm.
right? Save some money, save some weight, um, especially if you want it blackened underneath.
Yeah.
Um, but if you're looking for that glow of gold underneath, you can't do that. If you need, if it like for this stone, if I were doing it in gold, I'd probably do the whole because it would add to the yellowness of everything.
Mhm.
And it could be 18 karat on the outside and 14 karat on the inside, save you some money. So just know that you have options and you can mix and match. But on any of these, I'm going to start with my baseline of 22 unless I'm going for a heavy walled bezel. And as always with stones, I need to know what my minimum height is from table to culette. And then I need some room for filing. And I can go higher if I'm looking for something that's got a dramatic piece, as long as I don't go so high that it's tippy because of the weight of the stone being too top heavy. Like I wouldn't want a single stone pendant that falls over on me. So I'm going to give myself, looks like a couple millimeters, 2 to 3 millimeters, taller than table to culette. And just give myself a nice good strip of metal. I never worry unless I'm doing a whole boatload of stuff at a time about finding just how much I need, but I could probably, let's see, rough in. Yeah, I'm gonna stop cutting this halfway down. I don't need the whole thing. Um, but usually I've got enough strips that I've just got sitting away somewhere. And low, I am a lazy jeweler. You can
Uh,
absolutely saw this, but I'm gonna use shears. What was that?
I giggled.
Oh, being a lazy jeweler.
Yeah.
If the curling up of the metal really frustrates you, go saw. But I know that I'm going to get a straighter starting cut out of shears than I ever will out of sawing. So I might as well, as long as my hand strength is up to the weight of the material that I have. I might as well use a good pair of shears. I love these. These are the bonsai shears. I like them better than Joyce Chens. The Joyce Chens have a little bit more warp feel to them when you cut, um, meaning they seem to go side to side a little
Can you
bit
show
more.
can you show the shears you're referring to? Because I have the
They,
joist.
they've got a little bit more length to them than the Joyce Chens. And as with all shears, don't use the last quarter inch or so. You're cutting the body of the blade. That
Right.
last quarter inch will go askew. But I just like the grip on these. And it's if you look for red and white handled bonsai shears, you'll find them on Amazon, you'll find them other places. I don't know that there's a specific brand name. They're patented. I've only ever seen one brand. And I consider these a semi-perishable tool. I get fresh sets about every 2 years.
Mm.
I'm sure that you could spend money to go to a knife sharpener and get them sharpened back up instead. If you have a knife sharpener near you, I would spend more in gas trying to find a knife sharpener than it would cost to get a new pair. So they just work their way down to my cruddy pair. And, I use them for snipping other things. Just starting with a good rough flatten. Doesn't need to be perfect. But I do want to make sure that the stone isn't going to pop over the edge, so that's in good shape. And again, in general, there are very few stones that I won't want to start my line somewhere in the middle of the longest edge. You never want to start on a corner when you're doing these super sharp angles, because that'll put too much material at the corners because of the somewhat stiffer material of solder if you put it in there. So start somewhere along here. In this stone, because of its shape, I probably wouldn't object to doing halfway up a side either, which now that I'm looking at it, that's going to actually be easier on us because trying to match up to fit a curve is going to be a little harder than matching up to fit a side. So since it's sort of 6 of one, half dozen of the others, it's close to a similar layout. I'm going to just pick a side and then I'm going to put my first notch in for the corner. So making sure that I've got a fairly squared up edge. I'm going to use a square. And if you want a really great square for doing this, this is it's not called a slide rule. It's not a caliper, compass rule. Whatever the names of
No,
these are.
the caliper, I think it's a caliper.
Is it
Manual
also called a caliper? We call too many things calipers in our
I know.
industry. But this usually has another plate that slides in and out like our digital calipers do.
Yeah, that's a
But I
caliper.
just take that off because then it leaves this lovely notch that you can rest against your metal. So you can hold it in place and make sure you're getting squared up. Now that assumes that I have a nice square edge. So I'm going to, before I actually try to square against the edge, I'm going to do a little bit of cleanup, like a good doobie. Just making sure I have a fairly flat base and to work off of. And if you have trouble telling if you are flush, you can always put a line of Sharpie down your metal and do a little sanding and see what's left. I got a little red showing, so I'm not completely flat. And I'm doing, since it's been a long time since I've shown this, I've got a piece of plexiglass that I've taped my various grits down to. And that gives you about the smoothest surface you can get. If you find that you are having real trouble getting smooth filing, smooth sanding, excuse me, then something that's kind of counterintuitive. If you take a piece of household paper, kind of like, brawny or something like that, and you fold it into quarters and lay it down on your bench, and then put your sandpaper on top of that and sand, it acts as kind of like a bumper for a bumper. It kind of levels everything out because over the course of all the sanding, it sort of evens out instead of hitting all the notches on whatever surface you're working on. So that's another way to go. When I'm in a studio and they don't have good flat surfaces for me, I'll tend to do that. So now I've got a good square line and I'm going to give myself sort of part way down my, first I got to square up and cut my nice clean corner. It's not terrible, actually. It's already pretty square at that corner, so I'm in good shape. So I'm going to go a length that is half, but it doesn't have to be exacting, just so long as my seam is going to be middle. And then using a thin Sharpie, I'm going to mark my upright line that's going to represent the perfect bend. So if we're starting here, it could represent that. If we're going this way, it could represent the corner. I think I'm going to go corners first and end with the curve. For no particular reason other than that's what I feel like doing. Sometimes just the way of it. Right, so the act of sawing is a little different than when we're doing upright sawing. This is really just to create a line to follow. And so this is one of the few exercises where I tend to lift my saw up when I first get started until I can get a little bit better grip, because I don't want it to keep going offline. I like this. One of the most important things about this is keeping it vertical for what you're doing. And then also, well, besides the usual amount of dropping things, also you want to flip so that you're going from both directions when you saw, because we all saw a little bit stronger on one end of the cut versus the other. It's a little awkward for me to hold so that you guys can actually see what I'm doing, but generally I want to get a clean, even cut from both sides. And I'm just getting enough of a notch that I can then come back in. And I'm going to start with my triangle file. Do not ever go straight to square, even if you're doing a well-squared fold, because our files will take away a little material more than the angle they are cut at. Meaning, a square is cut every corner for us. It's going to take away 91 or 92. So you're over filing if you do everything with the square. And then add to that we don't always keep a perfectly straight line. We may wobble a little onto the left side or the right side, and we're making it even wider. Right? Again, I flip, so I'm doing both directions. Slow and steady. I always have to remind myself of that at this phase. And what I'm looking to do in this case is go about 1/2 to 2/3 through. In this case, because it's a sharp corner, I'm going to go closer to the 2/3. If I were doing a subtle corner, I would soften it up a little bit and go closer to the 1/2. But I want something that's very crisp around the corner. So what I'm looking for is how far through and down into the edge I'm seeing it dug. And then once I'm pretty darn close, then if I do need to square it up, I can take my square file and just do a couple passes to get the extra burring off, but not really take a whole lot of material away. Where's my square file there? My square file. So the square file is just really a couple passes each direction, and it wraps the cleanup. And you'll feel the difference. You'll feel it. Your triangle file, by the time you've gotten to that stage, will sort of be sliding and gliding. And your square file, once you pop it in, you'll feel it gripping just the outer edges of where it's positioned. So I've now got a fairly decent groove. And I'm going to do my first pass with my parallel jaw pliers at regular parallel jaw. There we go. Right, so parallel jaw pliers, I'm hoping you all have them, but the basic use of parallel jaw pliers, I did not know for the first umpty years that I was using them. You do not use these to bend, you bend against them. So I'm using them just as a holding thing, and I push up the material against them. Duh, because then you get a nice clean line. You're not warping or wobbling your metal. And look at how sharp that corner gets just from that combination of triangle. That's pretty darn close to a good 90-degree angle. Yeah, I'm off by a little bit because there's some curvature to this side. But we can really tighten that up. And worst case, if it's not a sharp, what you do is you now use your saw as a file. So now you go into that cut line and do tiny amounts of sawing down the cut and then a little bit more bend, and then a little bit of filing and a little bit more bend, which we're probably gonna have to do on one of these, but let's see what the actual angle is, because holy cow. One, that is a really nice fit. Let me zoom in so that you guys can see what I'm seeing a little better. So here's what we got for our first corner.
Mm.
And I'm going to need to bend it in ever so slightly. Get that to where you can see it. Ever so slightly, I need to bend the little side in. See what I'm seeing. I don't know if I can make it show. The yellow is a bad choice because it's not reflecting there's a tiny, tiny gap right inside the metal line over here that I don't know if you guys can see it. But so all I need to do, and this is not a cut change, this is just a bend in a little bit more than it was. And then we should have a nice tight fit because it's really close. No, not close enough. It's really, really close to being a 90-degree on that, but it's not exact. And this is the fiddly bit stage. I'm a little too far. Where you want to be as precise as you possibly can be, because you're going to get easier results. You're going to get cleaner results on each subsequent step. The errors sort of multiply. That's what's giving me grief. And I still got the curve on the other side.
You know, you're totally off screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you for that.
Okay.
I zoomed too close for you guys.
There you go.
There we go. So the curvature of not the little guy, but the longer side is giving me a little grief. And then there's a little tiny bit of torque probably in this corner. So what I'm doing is just adjusting a little bit at a time until I get my bend, and maybe I will actually have to go in with, when I straighten out that other wall, goes out of corner. So this is looking pretty good. And I am ready to mark my next point right at the tip of the stone. And this is where I'm always really fumbly fingered and awkward and need to be able to hold the stone with one hand, mark with another, and support so that it doesn't go sliding around with my third hand. And, there's not enough hands. So get the position that's going to hold it right, and then mark where the stone tip reaches the corner. And I've got that. I'm going to actually do it in two spots, up and down a little bit, so I can get a baseline for my straight line. Come on, little guy. Stay in place. And then again with the square. Show them on the right side. Cleaned up. Okay, so now I've got what's going to become the second straight edge. Because this one is half of the first straight edge, and this one is going to be that straight edge, and then we'll go into the curve. So now, once again, I'm going to do the sawing action. Okay, on. None of these messages are clear. Guys, I got a bunch of text come in. I just need to check and see if my mom is checking in. Nope, not yet. Okay. So, once again, doing the sawing slow and steady, a couple of really clean lift strokes to get us started. Get clean, not sloppy. There we go. Once you got the catch, then you can do the regular sawing. Flip it so that we get an even channel. Now, the more sides you have to your stone, the more awkward each subsequent step becomes to hold because it's in your way as you're folding. So sometimes you have to sort of unbend a little bit in order to then come back and rebend. Again, we go back to the triangle file. Track. Fail my track. So I can get this done. Do a little more touch with the saw because the triangle file was catching and sliding off. That's the mouse I was looking for. Follow. Now, if you've got more curves like more angles like I had on the stone that I showed you in the necklace, just be really careful to grind in lightly. Don't go digging super deep with your triangle file before making sure that you can't get the curve or the bend that you need. Because if it's a wide angle, it doesn't need the full depth of it. It may not even need the square touching up because you'll end up with too much cut away. And it's hard to keep it in place for the bend that you want. Checking the depth, so let's go a little further. And the reason we're doing the outer one is because it's a lot easier to fit an inner step to an already properly fitted exterior than it is to have a step built that fits underneath your stone well. That said, if you're doing the prong version of this, where it's just sitting on a base, you have to do what is essentially the interior before you do the exterior. And so you're going to be basically struggling not to do an around, but adjust inside the back of the stone, right? And in that case, I would go with a heavier gauge, 22 on up for that frame or that base that supports it. And really just work slowly and methodically to make sure it fits and rests comfortably on the piece. Okay. Right, so we are now at 2 of our angles, and again, my curved metal. I should have flattened my metal a little better before we started this. Do a little straightening. Nice tip if you've got a little bit of warp to your metal that you're having trouble with on the regular. If you have a hydraulic press, you can just put it between the platens and squish instead of hammering forever and a day, and that cleans things up. Oops. So here's what we've got so far. We can hold the stone in place. Halfway, cutting the corner, hitting our corner. So now we need to start shaping the turn. Right? And if you are super snug, you risk snapping your corners if you're super snug at this stage of the game just by accident. So make sure you're really positioned well. Because too tight here and you can not realize you're stuffing the stone in, even though it's not all framed up yet, it can really jack up the corner of a fragile stone. So I'm just going to use my half round pliers to make the start of my curve and get a feel for it. It needs to be a steeper curve than that, so I'm going to go a little tighter. Oh, I'm feeling so clumsy today, so dropsy. And sometimes this is easier to fit upside down. Then you got to remember which side you're trying to fit it to. That. So my curve is starting to get where I want it to go. It's got a little too much arch in the middle. Again, I'm doing this fairly quickly because I've got a lot of years on this one, but this could take an hour to get all the curves worked out. It could take longer. Don't judge yourself. Just go for the really solid fit. So I do not yet have the really solid fit. Flatten a little. And you'll see me switching around a lot of different pliers. Curves, in particular, if you don't have the exact device of the perfect curve to fit against, they're a little challenging to get just the shape you want. And so what I tend to do is alternate between my half rounds, which if I could only have one pair of pliers, that would probably be it. And flat pliers, which seems contradictory when you're working in a curve. What it lets you do is take some of the bump out along the way, because all you do is you squeeze over the curve and it sort of acts as a sort of a constrictor of the bend. It's not about squishing it flat, it's about taking the bumps out of the main curve. And I wonder if there's a way that, if I put white paper behind this, I might be able to give you all a top view of what I'm seeing and adjusting around. Let's see. So, and let me draw what you're looking for in this. So right now we have the upside down stone that's doing this, and I've built a frame that fits really snugly to here, and we're working the curve. And right now my curve is doing this, right? So this is my stone, little facets underneath. And I need to get this curve to fit here. So let me see if I can give you a top view. I'm going to try motion activated camera. Let me take the camera off of the tripod and see what we can get you. See how good I am even when I'm holding it. So, light source there. That's what we need. There we go. See that gap
yeah.
of the white up at
Definitely.
the top? Right?
Yes.
So this is the curve that's going to take me the ages and ages to get right. But also look at how snug I'm fitting into the corner, right? I want really pristine, not locked in tight. Like I shouldn't be able to pick the stone up with it being that tight, but I should be able to have a hard time moving it beyond and seeing anything up in this corner, which I don't. So now my action is to get this before I can figure out exactly where to put my next fold.
Right.
Questions?
No.
All right, I'm going to go back to regular camera mode. A little bit more fussing. Hopefully we'll get us to that curve. So close. Just that smidge at the far side. Then you shouldn't be able to pick it up, but in this case, now that I've got a curve on it, it's doable as long as I'm not pushing too hard. The curve is stopping it from sliding out. So I'm pretty pleased with that I can get a good measure of where I need to put my next mark. Good for you guys on that. Too much zoom. Right?
Mhm.
So we got a decent fit. I'm now going to mark my final fold on this one. Right where the point hits. Push it back a little further so I can make sure I have 2 points that I can work off of. All right, oh, I gotta make my square. And when I'm doing the curves, I like to double check that I'm not crazy out of alignment. That's gonna do. And you can see already that when I talked about that things get in your way, so I have to work around this fold or I have to bend it back open. I prefer to try and work around it whenever I can. Oh, come on.
And you're out of frame. Are you sawing or?
Oh, am I out of frame? I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
rotated my camera when I set it back for you guys. Hang on. I am sawing. Yes, thank
Oh,
you for
there you
calling
go.
me out.
Okay.
Yeah, I was having a coffee break. I don't drink coffee,
Oh,
but I
okay.
thought I'd take a break anyhow. Once again, going for enough of a gouge in there that I can then grab the file and follow it cleanly. Always working from both sides to keep it consistent. Awkward piece to hold. Okay, back to the triangle file. Oh man, you guys are probably getting that every time I blow the dust off of this. I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm blowing in your ears.
No, I think the noise is muted.
Oh, is it good?
Yeah.
It's the mic is right below where my where I'm blowing.
Oh.
So maybe it just doesn't want to low key ambient. Go a little deeper on this one. Top this one off with the square. bend. Once again, the parallel jaw as a fulcrum basically, and pushing over until we get to that close to the curve that to the fold that we need. Now with the other one in the way, we're gonna have to do a little finagling. But the act of pushing is with your hands and not with the tool. So got the right direction. So there, we're getting pretty close to what we need. That's a good point. You gotta, again, be careful not to squeeze too tightly to hold this in place, or else you can risk chipping. By the time we're done, we're gonna have drilled in little notches to help support before we push it down. But now we're at the step where we can create the divide of how does it fit overall. I'm gonna mark where I need to put my theme. Down on the side. And the more sides you have, obviously, the more steps you got. So if you can start out with one of these, it's just a three side, then go for it. But then in a really awkward spot, I have to move some material apart in order to make my measurements and to put things in place. Line that up. And on this final one, because it's going to be a cut instead of a saw, instead of a notch, I might leave myself a little extra room and I'll file back to it just to get my clean connection. So I'll probably just use my shears on the outside edge of the line and then clean up from there. And if you got your parallels on corners handy after you've done that cut, you can just go squeeze together. Ooh, I did a terrible job of making the width of my metal the same though. A little cleanup to do after that. The other reason I like the shears is there's less to file and clean on your seams.
Mm-hmm.
But if I've done well with all my measurements, and I've lined everything up clean, gotten rid of any of the torque of the metal. That's torque, not torque. And I should have relatively clean seam and lucky, nice clean fit. Right? If I have the right side out, I'm going to be this way. But it's a nice fit. There's a little bit of catch at a corner, but that's okay because that's why, we want it that level of snugness because I'm going to be drilling away a little bit at each corner to give it room to sit in there. But this is a happy fit. It's not resting on top. It's just sliding inside. I can now go and solder the seam together, which I will do. As we get over to another bench for a bit. A little bit of paste fluff. If you wanted to, and you're working this page, you can use the pips as well to help with the, not getting scale.
Your audio is a bit garbled.
I'm not using this audio. Hang on. That means that I may be on the audio all day. So let me see if I switch audio, whether you guys can still hear me.
Oh, that's better.
Can you hear me now?
Can hear you? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I had the mic
Sound
switched
both.
over to that. But is it good?
It's very low, but it's
Yeah.
that's
How
better.
about now?
It's still
Can you hear
low,
me now?
but we can hear you.
Yeah.
Huh. Let me see if I can update the microphone to louder. Switch to no test. Speaker is fine. Did not play with my audio settings between last session and this one. Let's see. Hmm. I'll give you my face while I'm working on this, so you know that I'm still here if my audio goes out briefly, but give me a sec.
Okay.
I do not want the microphone array. I do want the hand link. How's this doing? Is that better?
Well, you sound better, but you sound very soft.
Yeah.
Sound very
Oh,
soft.
there you
I don't have
wait.
a volume control on this baby. I think I have a volume control. Here, let me take the fluffy thing off. How's that? Is that louder?
No, same.
No. What I can play with. Sound mixer. Input device. Yeah, it's at maximum volume for coming in. So I will just talk
okay.
loudly for the last little bit of this.
All right.
Because
We can I can hear you, it's just
Yeah.
soft,
okay.
so
All right, I will do my best to be loud.
Okay.
Right now, I'm going to be soldering. Oops, except I've got to switch camera or else you won't see the soldering. There we go. And hard solder, fluxed as usual. I put my goggles down somewhere, so I got to grab those. And just one solder on the seam, and at the same time I'm going to hit each of the cut corners. Now if you are having a really difficult time on a many-sided item, it's okay, it's perfectly okay to come in and do some soldering in your corners and then come back and do the seam. So for example, if this were six angles that I had to deal with, I could put in my first couple, come in, grab some hard solder, and just put it in the corner and fill the fold that I've done, right? Because I've only got 3, I'm going to do all 3 of them at once, so I don't have to heat the whole thing again. Go in as fast and clean as you can. So I'm putting a fairly good sized chunk of solder in each corner, simply because it's a fairly little. So I want those pieces of solder to flow all the way down, just like the seam that I'm doing here when I'm doing this work. Oops, and my other one lost itself down the corner. Let me get that back. So I'm just stuffing it right inside the corner, heating the whole thing. I'm going to do the seam first in this case, just so it doesn't open back up on me. And then I'll work each corner to try and get it to flow down and fill what we sawed away, right? And what that does is it stabilizes the corner, and I'll show you this once we quench it. And I'll bring it over to the zoom in, but you'll see that there's now a solder line running down. You can see where it's blacker than the rest in the corners. Did I get it all the way down that one? Yep, I got it all the way down. So it's just filled up where we cut away, and then my regular seam line. I'll have to file a little bit off that top chunk, but it's connected solidly. So there we've got our outside frame. I'm going to pop that in the pickle briefly and come over for questions. Hopefully my volume was good enough for you guys to understand all of those solder points. Are there
Yes.
questions?
I heard that.
All right. While that's pickling, let's talk about the next step, which, what time are we at? 6:20. Yeah, we can try to get the next one done, but it may take into the next session. I don't want to go beyond 7 today. So now that we have a solid, it fits the stone the way we need it to exterior, now it's a lot easier to make the interior because I don't actually care how it fits stone. I care, does it fit inside the bezel I just made, inside the outer wall. So I'm putting the stone aside. I am designing entirely on how can I snugly fit inside the bezel. So I'm going to pretend this is the bezel we just made and not the scrap that I did. So I'm going to be building my frame to fit here. And there's a couple base rules. One is I don't want my inside seam to be on the same wall of the bezel as my outside seam. Just pick any other angle, any other side. And two is it has to be such a tight fit that you have to hammer it in. Okay, now that's a little tricky. Now, one of the things you're going to do to help with that if you can push it in, you're going to be fitting it and pushing it in. 90% of the time, you're going to also need to stretch the inside thing. So always err on the side of a little too small to stuff in there, because then we'll do tiny amounts of stretching of the walls until it's so snug that you have to hammer it in. But the other thing that you'll do is right before you're ready to hammer it in is you're going to file an angle off of I'm going to draw this one because it's a tricky one, the outside of the inside wall. So let me draw this one for you. Oops, my pen, no, that was my bevel. So we have our outside wall here, right? And it's got this thickness to it all the way around. And if we were going to look inside, it would look like that, sort of. And then we're building an interior one that just inside and is going to be a little shorter because we need it to actually have the stone resting on it, right? So it's going to get stuffed down inside, but along this out edge of the inside wall, if I were to look at the device set up, I would be taking an angle off of the top edge. I would be putting a bevel way around the top edge so that if I looked at my wall sideways, I'd have this, right? And if I'm looking at the other side, I would have this all the way around. Because what that's going to do is two things. One, it's going to make it a starting point so that when you're hammering, it has a little bit of a slide in possibility and gets sort of in place. And two, it creates a gap that when you flow your solder will fill. Right? And so rather than your solder, if you were starting here, your solder would do this as the two walls are put together. Mm-hmm. Instead, we're creating something where the solder line just brings it level with what we've done. Okay. So our stone will have a good resting place instead of this weird curve that's a real pain in the butt to carve out. So we're going to be soldering from the bottom up and getting the solder to flow until we can just see it in that notch that we've created all the way around. Is that making sense?
Yes.
Anybody else questions?
No.
Okay. So
Not yet.
now let's see how we're looking in the pickle, and we'll try to make that interior one and see how far we get today. So there is our now well soldered in each corner and well soldered in the seam walls. We need to get a flat surface on both sides so that we know, oops, that's not my sanding board. That's my sanding board. And in fact, just to speed things up, I'm going to actually do this on my grinder, so bear with me for a second. Love that grinder. And then I'll do a little touch up with files to get the chaff that shows up when you do a coarse grind like that. So I'm just going to take a little old half round. Actually, this, yeah, not a half round, but thunk. Just going to clean up some of the extra bits that the grinder leaves behind. Just to give myself a good starting point. Because otherwise they'll get in the way of a tight fit for the inner loop. Looking pretty good. All right, now my stone is, I don't know if I have a top or a bottom to this, but we'll find out. I think I have a top. There's my top. My stone is going to fit inside. Again, I don't want to shove it in there because I don't want the corners to be at risk, but I don't need very much sticking up over the top to push down over the stone. So what I'm looking for in terms of the height of the inner wall is enough that when it rests, the coulette doesn't poke out the bottom or even just touch the bottom. And I still have enough material up at the top. So that's generally going to be the true height if it's a flat stone, or just a little bit less than include table, so that it's resting at the base. And so I'm going to be looking for something that's about yay far up, right? And that'll rest, everything on the stone will rest on top of it. So I'm going to do that out of 24 gauge. Man, I really cleaned up all the things I needed for this session. Let's see. I have 24 gauge. I do not. Let's see if I have 26 gauge. When you've been working in large scale stuff, you use like every scrap of metal that you got in the space. Looks like that might be fine silver. It is. Actually, that's okay with me. I'm going to do this out of fine silver because I have it handy. But you could do it out of sterling or fine. In fact, you can do the exterior out of sterling or fine, but I tend to go even heavier if I'm doing fine silver for the outside edge because it wants to move a little bit more. Let's see. There's that. Yeah, no, this is too cruddy. Let me get something that's a cleaner piece. I have a 24 gauge handy. I think I have to go pull it from the shelf. Yeah, I've got some 26 gauge. I'm going to use that. Once again, quick and easy using the shears, but I judge if you prefer to saw. Okay, so with the thinner gauge metal, the part of the advantage is that you can do a little bit more hand forming of it. And I am less worried about the cornering. So I could start this. This is going to keep me opposite, or I can start on the other side. Either one will do. I don't really have a strong preference, so I'm going to just put, because that curve is a little easier to get when it's whole instead of in pieces, I'm going to do the opposite straight edge as my starting point. So once again, we're going to make sure that we're fairly squared up to begin with. And note the height differential. It's going to leave me enough to go over the top while also still being resting below the coulette when it's done. So I'm going to start and make sure I've got a square edge like I did the first time. Make sure that's actually fairly square. In good shape because that was machined. And I'm going to put my first line, which is always the easiest one because it's not relative to anything else except for the start. So let me get a good clean line. Once again, sawing from both directions. Just got to be extra careful with the thinner gauge because it's really easy to go through it quicker. Especially when you get to the filing stage. Flip the directions. We get a clean fold. So what the kinds of clues you'll get if you're not doing a good job of consistent both direction filing is that one edge when you do your fold will try to sort of curl in on itself, like one side, one end or the other of your crease will sort of cave in on itself or refuse to cave in to the fold that you want. Let me do a final touch up with the square on this one. Or it'll distort and sort of want to go cattywampus. Pushing in, getting this first crisp cut and making sure that I'm working in the corner that I want to be in. So now it gets a little trickier to get your where am I putting my next fold, because now I'm not worrying about the outside point, I'm worrying about the inside point. Again, we err on the side of caution and make it a little smaller than big, because you can't, if you make it too big, you're going to have to redo it. So what I'm doing is I'm marking basically right on the inside line. If I can get my pen in the place that I need it to, on the inside line of that interior wall. Oops, I still need that. Once again, doing the sawing trick, starting with straight down, just enough to catch it. Switch to our triangle file. Remembering to go both directions. Touching it up with a square file. And as a reminder, you'll feel the square file catch as it goes through after the triangle file has been sort of sliding through, as the square is just taking the last little bit off. We're lining up on the other side of the notch and pushing towards it to get our angle. And now we check and see that we actually fit. And this part gets a little easier because now we've got something to curve inside of, right? So it's not as hard and fiddly. I just need to put enough curve in to get it sort of springing back against the wall that it's going to be curved up. So I can go a little bit more directly. Where's my, oops, that's what I dropped, didn't I? Favorite flat pliers, there we go. All right, so when I'm looking inside, making sure that my new seam is going on the far side from the other one. And then I'm going to be pushing against the wall until I can get to the point that I can mark my next fold. This one's going to be a little trickier to hold in place. But again, if I'm a little smaller than I want to be, I'm happy because I want to make the sizing be a snug fit. And one time more with the saw. Some of the troubleshooting things that can happen or some problems that can happen along the way. I have often gotten to like my fourth fold in a multi-part thing and managed to cut through. Sometimes salvageable if it's not all the way cut through, like if you've just managed to cut too far at the top edge because you forgot to flip. You can put some solder fill in there, but oftentimes it is just easier to start the folds over again so that it's a clean and strong line. Okay, triangle file. Been back and forth. Good, and ready for the next fold. Okay, so now we see how well we did for fitting inside. Pretty good. I got to put a little more curve in my curve in order for it to be right up against the wall. It gets a little squished as we do those other steps. And then I need to get my measurement for the last of the cuts so that I know what my total length is, which means I need this to be pushed all the way against that wall and this to be all the way in that corner. And hopefully not distorted. Nope. So I'm holding it as wide open as I can to figure out where I'm going to mark it. And already it's starting to get tight enough that I should be having a little bit of trouble pulling it in and out if I've got it all the way in there. How snugly this is fitting even now. Right, so you see this slight overlap that I've got where the material is coming over. That's going to be made up for by the gaps in the corners. As soon as I actually solder this into place, it'll still be loose in this, but it'll be a better fit. So I'm pretty pleased with that sizing. And now I'm going to do my soldering before I finish fit it, because I'm going to have to size it and tighten it, or rather stretch it. So I need to get those corners and the seam soldered. Over to the soldering bench. Once again, this is going to be with hard solder. Keep a little flux in all the corners. A little more hard solder than I have out. I am on screen for you guys, yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Right, once again, I'm doing both the seam and the corners at the same time because I can. It's totally okay to do these separately if that's your preference, or to, again, work the corners and lock them in place as you go along, or just crucial ones that give your shape that what you need as you're going. That's one, that's two, that's three. I'm going to double check because I don't think I got a good fit. So I got a little bit of warpage on the seam. So I'm going to do a bit of repair. There we go. So sometimes one corner of the seam will sort of spread out on you and warp and it doesn't hit quite where you want it to. So you can actually get in there with your tweezers like I just did. And while it's flowing, you press it back into place and recover from it. Sometimes it needs a little touch more solder at the end that opened up, which is what happened in this case. But now we've got our nice interior. And I'm going to toss that in the pickle for a second, just because it's pretty grubby. And I want the interior pickled because you want your tight fit to happen without flux in the way. So make sure that these are clean as you're fitting them. And so once that's pickled, we're going to, again, level the top and the bottom because we don't want a stone that sits this way. And we will then do our snug fit. How are we doing for time? Okay. Any questions on that stage? Nothing. All right. They're really, other than having way too many corners for your heart health, you know, they're really pretty much the same as any other stone that you're going to work.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people about learning how to do these shapes, I actually talk about, I find the very first one you're going to do if you're doing a step bezel is an oval you'll have the most success with. Round then is kind of a cakewalk. It's just, I don't always recommend starting with round because you see the imperfection of a not quite round a lot more than you see the imperfection in an oval. That's why I say start with ovals, move to rounds. The next one I would go to in your learning exercise is a pear-shaped because you only have one point you have to contend with and you can work your way around to it and those can cut across each other, right? So I don't have to meet like this. I can do that and then file my point once I've gone past it. Then you can work on, which is going to have gentle corners, which give you the exercise of having to meet those points. And then you work on squares and, you know, sharp triangle cuts and things like that and move on to these others. And then we never, ever, ever talk again about doing an emerald cut unless you really want to. But no, so I would rather do one of these funky shapes any day than an emerald cut because then I'm working to each side and I remember that. It's harder to do that with an emerald cut because if they're well cut, the precision should be there. If they're not managed to flip your setting around or whatever, you think you screwed up and you haven't. It's just a matter of being upside down or whatever. There's a whole lot that goes into the frustration factor in that. And you may not have it as a nemesis. Maybe you'll absolutely get there right away. I'm just going to grind this. Give me a minute. Okay, and once again, we need to clean out all of the extra chaff because again, it can get in the way of a proper snug fit. And in this case, I'm going to clean both the outside and the inside. Well, the other one, I just did the inside of both edges. Because sometimes right side up or upside down, one will fit better than the other. So you might as well have the ability to cheat it if you need to. But in this case, we're going to try and make sure that our seams stay opposite each other. And if you got a blob of solder, that could get in the way. This isn't a terrible invasive blob, but that's from when I did the second soldering on the seam. So I'm just making sure I don't have any bits sticking out that could interfere with a clean fit. This is not the exterior filing down of the angle yet. This is still, what are we doing for size? So here's my original seam. My other seam is going the other way. So I would like to get this fit in here. And I know I'm in pretty good shape because it's hard to get in to the setting already, but it's still not a great match on the lines. So I need to do a little flattening at my seam side and a little bit of twisting or untwisting of a couple lumpy. Try that again. Side, might not have side. Yes. I'm closer than I thought to being fully fitted. But still, there's a couple little cornery bits that I'm not thrilled by. So where do I need to adjust? So now my adjustment exercise is one of really minute tweaks to where the curve curves or where a corner sticks out. I'm seeing a little bit of gap at one edge of the curve, which is probably why that corner doesn't want to go into place. And I'm a close enough fit that I am going to actually do my beveling just on this one edge that I'm about to shove down in. So I'm just actively a little lip along that edge, including at the corners. That's the important, get you past the start. And that may be enough to get me snugly in. Oops, that is backwards. There we go. All right, so now I'm going to need to take a mallet and line things up a little bit. Start to get tapped in. So the fact that I have to tap this in, one might think, oh, well, it's clearly fitted right. But when we look at it, we will see that is not the case. So I'm going to be pulling this in and out of the thing a few times. But let me zoom in so you guys can see what I'm talking about. See that gap up at the top? Now I have to do some stretching to make this fit. And that's a combination of, once I'm in here, I can squeeze the two together in ways that, but I also need to make one side a little longer. So I'm going to have to do some, I'm going to have to pull this out and I'm going to have to stretch this wall. And sometimes it's a little tricky to get it out once you've gotten it in, but we figure out a way. This is a good first fit. Oops, but I got to remember which wall I need to do that to. This little wall. And I'm going to just do this with and I'm doing a squeeze, 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 and then flip it and squeeze the opposite edges of those lines. And this just stretches a minute amount.
You're out of frame.
That one. Oops, sorry. I zoomed in.
That's
I forgot
okay.
I zoomed in. I'll do that again so you guys can see it. So I'm using the round pliers. If you want to be more gentle to your material, you could use the half round pliers, but you're not gonna get as much out of each squeeze. So I'm just doing squeeze, 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 flip it, and in the same spots, do a squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Now, recovery trick. If you've created this, and you realize your walls are sort of tapered on one side, you can squeeze only on the narrow side of the taper and it'll widen them to straighten them back out. So the squeezy factor is not just about sizing, it's sometimes about repositioning. And I got to make sure my seams are going the right way. Okay, so we're getting a closer fit, but I still need a little more stretch on that same wall. And I may end up needing a tiny bit of stretch on the longer wall. So we're going to do a couple more squeezes. And the marks on the inside aren't a huge deal. We're going to be sanding interiors. So that'll go away. This way. Keep flipping it over. Ooh, so we're now getting a much nicer fit, but it's still not snug because now it's lined up, but it means it's so loose that I can move it in and out. So I need to get even tighter. I'm going to do a little bit on the longer wall to give myself some leeway. And this is an exercise this is one of the exercises that I end up with blisters occasionally if I'm doing a bunch of settings, because this act of squeezing is so rough on the hands because you got to really, yeah, I mean, we're moving metal, like we're literally moving metal. And good side down, all side, okay. All right, so I want you to see how much improved, let me zoom in again for you. Let's see how much improved that fit is, but it's still got a little bit of gapping, right? This is not good enough. I need to get tighter. So I'm going to see if I can work this a little bit more while in view for you guys. And these are subtle adjustments that we're doing. We're talking about like tenths of a millimeter making the difference between a good fit and a not good enough fit. Check it again. Just remember which side is your beveled side, because that's the one you want to go in. Oh, 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 this is looking promising. Back to having to do a little tapping. Okay, I've got a little bit that is gapping, but it's more about not being squeezed up against the wall.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a little still in that one corner that I need to take care of. So I think I still need to stretch these two walls another squeeze or two. But what we're seeing is, so when this is done right, you can see that I'm not seeing gaps up above, except for a tiny little bit in the corners because of what I need to adjust still. So you want to have little to no gappage, ideally none, because we're going to solder fill this seam. And then when we file, it'll look as if it's invisible. It's just a solid piece of metal. That's the goal. If you don't do this snug fit, sure, it may hold your stone, but it won't look super good. So this is the big difference in a really well finished setting, is how cleanly you've made these connections by making it a tight fit. So once again, sorry, I'm out of screen. Once again, I'm just doing a few more squeezes on each long side, each flat side. If I had to, I could do them on the curve, but the curve is actually fitting quite nicely right now. Making sure I've got my bevel side down.
Now you're out of screen.
Oh, thank you.
There you go.
Bevel side down and seams opposite. Well, now we're getting there. Okay. Oh, still a little bit in this corner. That's the spot that I'm not
Maybe
happy
it's the
with
corner.
right there. It's certainly, the corners are always the challenge.
I know.
But I still need
hate
enough
corners.
material. I know, so what it is I can get it into the corner, but then it gets loose right opposite it.
Right.
So I still need to size a little tiny bit more, and I may have to actually do a smidge on each edge of the curve in order to get that to work. That may be where my material is going to come from at this point. but it's getting harder and harder to get in and out each time, which is a good sign. So let's try actually squeezing right by each corner. Just one more little squeeze on each. Okay, and then back in. Oops, wrong side. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. So before I go to do the soldering, let me flatten that a little bit. Before I go to solder this in place, I absolutely want to gently check that my stone doesn't fall and break, for one, but that my stone is fitting below the line. Come here. Damn it, I bet I did the top instead of, I mean the bottom instead of the top. I'm gonna have to do a little cleanup of the interior, but that it can go where I need it to go. Let me see if I can recover from that. I can. So what I'm seeing is I have a slightly wider side on one of them than on the other. And I want to do this adjustment. My choices are to either flip this and have my seams line up, or I think I'm going to leave it as is. I'm going to stretch the corners a little bit at the end of this, but I can see that were I to get my stone down to the level, I'm not going to stuff it in snap if I did, but if I get down to that level that I've got it set to, it's down low enough that the stone will have room to be set. That's what I'm looking for. If I have not gotten that, if it's too tall in there right now, always push my inner bezel out a little bit and just solder it while it's sticking off the end. Like I'm going to try and scoot it out so you guys can see what I'm talking about, and then I'll put it back. So I could have it hanging out off the back edge, and then I'll file that away if I needed to. If I've gone this far and done all the work, rather than going and recreating another one that fits that's shorter, that's what I can do. All right, so I'm now ready to pop this over to the soldering station, and we will solder this and have a good wrap to our stone setting, or to our bezel setting making. I'm going to flux the heck out of both sides. And again, this is the notch, the gap between them, which there isn't a gap, it's just a carved line, is the outer wall, the divot that's made by having done a little bit of beveling, and then my inner wall. I'm putting that face down, and I'm putting my solder, pretty consequential amounts of it, along the top. And I'm going to do this with medium solder. And you could do chip solder all the way around. You could do balled up, which is what I'll end up doing. You could do wire solder and rest it in the various places. But you want to be generous, because it's not only soldering where we are, but also going to be soldering flowing down between the two walls. So I always start with my corners getting a fair amount, and then put a little bit extra in betweens. And you can always add more down the road, but if you can do it in the first pass, it's much cleaner. Okay, and then this is about getting consistent heat between the walls, which is the tricky part. Because I don't want it flowing down the outside walls. I want it flowing between the walls. And when it works, you'll see seam lines created. And when there's more gap than you realize, you're going to have places like this corner where it's gapping. Sometimes that gap is small enough that we can just fill it with solder. In this case, it may or may not be. That's a bad piece of solder. And one of the things that can happen is if you don't have it large enough, if it's not a tight enough fit, your inside seam could separate on you. That's a very common issue. What I'm trying to do is see if I can get them to squish a little closer together as they flow. There we go. That did that trick. And a little bit more over here. I still need to stuff a little more solder in. If I'm going this route, I may end up going with a stick soldering just to control where I'm touching down the solder as it flows. Yeah, which I did very poorly there. I'm going to go back to balls of solder because I clearly am not shaky. I am too shaky to get it right where I want it. Okay, I think I have to clean it up because I managed to get a lot of blackening right where I wanted. There's a little tiny bit in this corner that's gapping in the problem corner. The rest of it's looking pretty clean. I think I can put a little bit more there. That makes me happier. A little bit more at that corner. That makes me very happy. Flow, flow, flow. Okay, so the only thing I'm grumpy about is my one sharp corner needs a little bit of work. The other thing that I check for is, have I gotten my solder well flowed up into the upper channel? And in this case, I have, with a minor exception of one corner that is not big enough for me to bother with. So I'm going to stop there. And we now have a bezel, quench and pickle. And then we're going to do a lot of sanding and cleanup. I'm going to decide if the corner merits some squeezing together. I might stuff a tiny piece of wire down that slot and then solder it in so that I've got some material to work against. Or I may not. I may just be happy with it as is. And then the thing that I do, once I've put it onto my piece, I'm going to take ball burrs, and in each corner right above, right at the point where the inner wall and the outer wall meet, I'm making a hole, not a drilled through hole, but a divot at each corner, so that my corners, when they're pushed down when we're setting, they won't push up against metal. They'll have a little air pocket, and that'll keep the corners theoretically from chipping. Right? Questions?
A lot of work.
It is, but I mean, you can see they go
I
faster
can see the
as you get
results.
experience. Say again?
I can, yeah, I mean, you know, it's the outcome is wonderful, is beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and so this is the base of what I teach in the decorative stone setting, the one that I'll be doing for Metalworks,
Oh, okay.
because you can then riff off of this. This is one of the things that I learned from surprise, surprise, John Cogswell, where you can
Really?
make sort of yeah, I know, shocking, sort
Yeah.
of a trompe. It's a trompe. Am I saying it right? Trompe
Trump
l'oeil,
live.
trompe.
Yeah.
Yeah, trompe l'oeil, where you can make a fake it's not even fake. By the time you're done, it is three-dimensional effect on the surface of the outer wall, with some basic files and saws and things like that. And the dimensionality of it is really spectacular. Or you can add decorative elements like gallery wire on top of it, or make them even the outer rim.
Mhm.
And so this is foundational work that we just did, even though it's on a weird shape, you know. Or we could be cutting away large chunks of it and create sort of a crenellation along the top that makes for a different decorative element. Or we can add those prongs like I was showing you in the half done one. And nobody says prongs can't just be there because they're decorative. They don't have to be the primary
Right.
holding device. So there's a lot of variants you can do with the basic skills of a step bezel. It's a really, really handy baseline. And it doesn't have to be just for faceted stones. You can do it on cabs as well.
Mhm.
Especially look good for high domed cabs. So, any questions? All right. I'm gonna call that. I can pull it out of the pickle so you guys can see it. It won't have been fully cleaned, but you can see
I
it,
just
and then
want to
I'll.
tell you, it's such a pleasure to be back watching you do
Good,
this stuff.
good.
Thank you.
I'm 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 glad you
Missed
are
you.
back. Yeah, I missed you a lot too. I'm going to show you guys this on the bench just so you can see where we're at right now, right? With the step inside.
Mhm.
And this, I won't do a whole lot of finishing on it until I'm ready to incorporate it in a project because I need to know whether I'm going to add other elements to it or not.
Right.
Just a reminder that this project is probably going to wrap come December because holy heck, I have a book to write. I need some of
Excellent.
that time. Yeah. And yeah, I hope that you all will bring some projects to show and tell on the next round. Our next session is July 16th. And hopefully I will have had time to give some thought to what you guys helped me with on the think through of our large project. I'm not
Just
going to have
a
a lot of
second,
time in the
Julie.
studio between now and then.
Oh
But,
no.
Oh, man.
yeah, I'm traveling. It's okay. It's good.
I won't be
Vacation.
here
Me
on the
too.
6th.
Oh, you won't be on the 16th?
No, I've
Phooey.
got
Okay.
I've got a surgery.
Oh,
Wish you
okay.
well.
Well,
Oh,
yeah,
thanks.
I hope it goes smoothly and the videos will be up. So while you're recovering, you can watch what you
Yeah,
didn't
it's
see.
outpatient. I mean, it's not a big deal thing, but it's
Okay.
still wrong day.
Okay, well, sorry.
Well, actually, no.
Um,
If I go in at 6 in the morning, I may I'll be back by 4:30. Okay, got it.
and we'll have you on whatever
That's a beautiful thing.
post-recovery
Yeah,
drugs.
I'll just be a little loopy, but you know. But that's no
What's new to
different.
that?
Rachel, are you familiar with New Approach?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I am here for the whole week doing their
Oh,
stone setting.
That's exciting.
oh,
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
nice. Right now? So you're
right now.
watching me from New Approach?
From my, well, no, from my hotel. We
Well,
had our
Has
class
it
earlier.
started?
Huh?
Has it started or has the session
It's in
started
the
already?
evening, so yes, I already had the session. I've been here since Sunday, so we've had class from Monday until this Friday coming up.
oh, that's
Nice.
great.
And
Yeah, and we've
are you taking it
like
with
been
Blaine or one of his
with Blaine.
is it
Yes,
Blaine?
with Blaine.
Yeah.
Yes, Blaine and
I've been
Drew.
wanting to take that set. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
wanting. Are you doing the in the first week one or the like the advanced?
Well, the
program?
first for stone setting, the first time,
Okay,
yeah, because they got an advanced stone setting. But no, I'm doing the first. Yeah,
nice.
we are
And
knocking
what
it out,
topics?
learning a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
they're using the microscopes and the
Yes,
yeah. You've got all.
yes, trying to get familiar with
So
that, but I move it to the side.
I feel a little honored that you would step away from Blaine Lewis to come watch my little demo
I
here.
mean, this is in the evening.
Yeah,
Their classes, from 8 o'clock until 4 or 8:30 till 5. So yeah.
that's a long day of stone setting.
Yes.
So what settings have you learned so far?
Oh my goodness. I couldn't tell you all of them. Some are channel. We've done the different types of prong settings, the
Yeah,
basket. It's just a whole bunch of them. I can tell you later on when I actually write them all
nice.
down. But
Awesome. Yeah, take good
we've been
notes. That's a lot of information.
a lot.
Cool.
Yes, a lot.
All right. Well,
I'm
enjoy it.
enjoying it though. Thank you. I'm enjoying.
Can't wait to see what you do with it when you get back home.
Yeah,
A little bit of
definitely.
pressure. Got to put
Just a
one into
tad, just
each
a
in
tad.
one big piece.
Well,
Not
while
too much,
she's
just
writing
a
her
tad.
book, you
I
can be
know.
showing us your stone setting.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, you
yes.
can take over and do your own session.
Yes.
All right, gang, I'm gonna call it a night. It was good to see you all, and
Yes.
hopefully
Hope
I'll
your
see
mom
you
keeps
most of you
doing
soon.
better.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being able to see her. So in only a few more days, I'll be able to go visit. So thanks,
Yay.
gang.
Care, everybody.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
All right.
night.
Take
All right,
care.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.